Solo Leveling by Chu Gong. Chapter 61 Part 1. The new president of the Hunters Association. An executive meeting was held in order to fill the vacant seat of the president of the Hunters Association of Korea. More than 30 leaders, including the vice president, directors of all the branches, and the heads of each department filled the large conference room. Each person possessed socio-political power equal to those in high-level government positions, or those on the board of the largest corporations, yet they all looked concerned. The air was tense as they deliberated on the situation at hand. "We must choose the next president of the association." Finally, the crux of the matter. Looks of apprehension flashed across everyone's faces following the vice president's declaration. A few people gulped audibly. It was time to decide the fate of the Hunters Association. They were acutely aware that, as the control tower for all the hunters in Korea, the Hunters Association having any instability within it meant instability for the country, especially with both the number of new hunters and spawning gates on the rise. "Well then," the vice president, who was presiding over the meeting, closed the file folder in front of him, making it clear that whatever was written in the report could not compare in importance to his next words. "Following an extensive discussion with the board of directors, we are recommending Director Jinchul will be named as the new president of the association." This was the first time Jinchul was hearing about this. His head whipped around to face the vice president, his eyes clearly asking, "Why me?" The vice president pulled the mic closer, as his eyes remained on Jinchul. "Director Wu has a wealth of practical experience and knowledge from working as president Go's right-hand man. He also possesses the strength needed to lead other hunters." This was true. President Go had highly valued Jinchul, who had elected to work for the association despite being courted by large guilds. He was an A-rank hunter so powerful that, had his magic power evaluation been slightly higher, he would have been the second S-rank hunter to join the association after President Go. He had 4 years of practical experience under his belt, and was a top-tier A-rank hunter. There were murmurings among the group when Jinchul's name was first brought up, but they soon died down as the vice president explained the board's choice. There was no other candidate better suited to lead the legion of hunters working for the association. Jinchul himself was unable to accept the endorsement. "I'm lacking in several areas needed to fill this role. There are many others who rank above me. Besides, aren't I too young?" Jinchul was in his mid-30s. Though he had amassed invaluable experience in the 4 years he dedicated to the surveillance team, he was still way too green to become the head of the organization. At least, that was his opinion. "Vice President, there's you and the various members of the board of directors, not to mention the other directors." Jinchul looked each of the prominent people in the eye before turning to the vice president again. "How could you think I'm good enough to replace the late President Go with all these great people here?" The vice president turned his head and let out a quiet sigh. He had expected resistance, but he hadn't expected the pushback to come from Jinchul himself. The vice president shut off his mic. He had already revealed the official position of the board of directors, so he would now unveil the actual reason they'd recommended Jinchul. Everyone in the room pricked up their ears. The vice president explained, "No one else, myself included, has the influence you have on Korea's strongest." A member of the Hunters Association of Korea referred to as Korea's strongest. Everyone knew exactly who the vice president was talking about. He's proven his power in Korea, Japan, and the US. It's already the case to an extent, but it's clear that, going forward, the Hunters Association will not be able to function smoothly without him. A national-level hunter had the power to mobilize a whole country, and yet Jin Woo-sung had brought such a hunter to his knees. What kind of influence could the mere Hunters Association have on such a hunter? Their option was to politely ask him for favors and await his answer. They needed someone able to approach Jin Woo, just like President Go had when he asked him to rescue the Jeju Island raid team from certain death. Currently, Jinchul was the closest person to Jin Woo within the association. That was good enough to make him the next president. No one on the board of directors had been able to object to the vice president's logic when he first nominated Jinchul to them. Similarly, everyone in the large conference room started nodding along with his reasoning. "We cannot compel you to do as we ask any more than we can hunt or some." The vice president had made himself crystal clear. The hunters held all the cards here. "But please give our offer some serious consideration." In the brief silence that followed, all eyes were on Jinchul. Their stares seemed to needle at his skin as he cautiously opened his mouth. OMG, Jin Woo blurted out. Though it was frequently used by Jaina, Jin Woo never thought he'd use that expression until now. His fingers sped across the screen as he scanned the article on his cell phone. Jinchul Woo named president of the Hunters Association, successor to the late President Gun Hee-go. Seeing Jinchul's name trending had made Jin Woo worry that something bad had occurred, but after seeing the good news, he heaved a huge sigh of relief. To think Jinchul Woo, someone he considered a close acquaintance, had risen to become president of the Hunters Association. He beamed, feeling genuinely happy for Jinchul, as he turned off his phone and tossed it gently over his shoulder. The ant soldier standing behind him barely caught it. He watched the ant tuck the phone in his bag, then gave him a warning. "Your predecessor did a much better job. You've got some big shoes to fill." Jinho was preoccupied with his duties as vice president of their guild, so this ant had been selected as the luggage carrier in his stead. The ant bashfully bowed his head. "Good." Jin Woo patted the ant soldier on the shoulder and smiled. Then he turned around, ready to resume hunting after lunch. However, these again?" Jin Woo rubbed his forehead as he took in the sight of the dense thicket of trees before him. What had previously been a village destroyed by the giants was now a forest reminiscent of the Amazon. One didn't need to be a hunter to find the area suspicious. Oddly enough, animals didn't seem to question anything. There were traces of half-eaten animal carcasses strewn about the place. Jin Woo clicked his tongue at the flies swarming around animal bones. He then picked up a stone from the ground and threw it. Whoosh! This was no ordinary stone. It wasn't a stone flung by any old S-rank hunter, but one flung by Jin Woo's son. Crack! The stone became lodged in the face of one of the tree-type magic beasts, and its eyes shot open. Its face contorted as it rose to its full height and ran toward Jin Woo. Gra! Apparently, even plants got angry when struck. Jin Woo summoned a demon monarch's dagger and dashed to meet it. The massive tree swung its branches at him. So slow. Jin Woo took advantage of its slow speed to examine the tree's face, while avoiding the two branches it swung in lieu of fists. On the other hand, the tree was unable to follow Jin Woo's movements. Awful reaction time, too. Every time a branch struck the ground, it left a deep dimple, but Jin Woo sucked his teeth in disappointment. It's not that strong considering its size. The tree-type magic beast looked strong because of its huge body, but its destructive power was terribly weak when compared to giant-type magic beasts of a similar size. However, the tree-type beasts had one huge advantage to make up for all their shortcomings. Jin Woo gripped his dagger tightly and stabbed the magic beast's body again and again. Gaia, ga! Contrary to its never-ending screams, the tree didn't go down easily. Mutilation. The dagger hacked into the tree like a spray of bullets. SHK. Jaiwea. The tree squeezed its eyes shut and randomly swung its limbs against Jinwoo's flurry of blows. Jinwoo deftly avoided them as he approached the tree. He returned the dagger to the inventory and concentrated mana into his fist. Jinwoo threw a single punch. Crack! The tree doubled over and was sent flying. Gaia! The magic beast flailed on the ground while screeching in pain, but managed to drag its broken body toward Jinwoo with one hand. Whoa! Tree-type magic beasts were incredibly durable. They had been newly discovered in Japan and displayed amazing stamina. This particular one finally stopped moving only after Jinwoo struck it dozens more times. Gah! With one last outburst, the dead tree spewed putrid sap from its mouth. Ugh! Jinwoo covered his nose. The awful stench was more annoying in Jinwoo's book than its resistance. As the one ant soldier diligently extracted essence stones from the fallen tree, Jinwoo glared at the remaining trees. That many more to go. It hadn't been that long since the dungeon break had occurred, but these magic beasts had already established a veritable forest. Jinwoo frowned as he gauged the situation. But man was an intelligent animal, and having already discovered their weakness, Jinwoo had a card up his sleeve. I figured this would be the case, so they're ready to go. Jinwoo gleefully summoned a few select soldiers. Come on out! Fong and 3 mage soldiers emerged, as if they had been waiting for his call. It had definitely been worth keeping these 4 with him, while he'd sent his other shadow soldiers out to battles in other locations. Begin! The mages and Fong, who had finished enlarging his body, rained down fire at Jinwoo's command. Boom! Boom! Kaboom! Kaboom! The trees screamed as they caught on fire, their bodies twisting in agony. Gaia! Jaya! Gra! Despite not being dry wood, the mana-powered fire easily burned them down. Even the foul-smelling sap evaporated quickly from the heat, allowing Jinwoo to comfortably watch things unfold from an adequate distance. He smiled as everything went exactly according to plan. The system messages kept coming. You have defeated an enemy. You have defeated. You have defeated. Countless notifications poured in. The magic beast's ability to spawn quickly was bad news, but it worked in his favor because of the experience points he racked up. Sure enough, that ping sound seemed to ring clearer than usual. You have leveled up. Now, that's what Jinwoo was talking about. He brought up his stats to check his gains. Stat window. Ping. Name, Jinwoo Sung. Level, 133. Job, Shadow Monarch. Title, Demon Hunter and 2. Others, HP, 78,330. MP, 136,160. Fatigue 3. Stats, Strength, 308. Stamina, 307. Agility, 316. Intelligence, 321. Perception, 298. Available ability points 0. Jinwoo had reached level 133 in no time thanks to his soldiers taking care of raids all over Japan. The many magic beasts pouring out from gates had been a boon. Most of his stats had exceeded 300, with his perception stat being a mere 2 points shy. I'll pour everything into perception after tomorrow's daily quest. Satisfied, Jinwoo closed the stat window. There was still the matter of the coming war the King of Giants had spoken of, as well as the grand plan President Go had mentioned. But what was the use of worrying over it? He just needed to be ready for whatever was coming. His current priority was to keep leveling up. Baru, who had been leading the ant army into battle far from Jinwoo, suddenly reached him. "My liege, if I may, I would like to ask something of my king." What could this be about? Puzzled, Jinwu sent a message back. "What's up?" "Don't have anyone who can help you. I can be reached through the Hunters Association of Korea." The Hunters Association had received a flood of inquiries after Jinwu's interview aired, most of them from the top hunters in the world. Some of them even visited Korea in secret to consult with Jinwu. Leonard Nairman, Germany's strongest hunter, was among them. They got a prominent S-rank hunter, and even one of the national-level hunters. I've got no chance against something like that. He was a humble man and incredibly perceptive. Instead of being paralyzed with fear, Leonard decided it would be more prudent to put his faith in Jinwu and the countermeasures the Korean man claimed he had in place. And so he made his way to Korea. Leonard arrived at Incheon Airport and breathed in the Korean air. So this is the scent of Korea. Excited at visiting Asia for the first time, he cheerfully asked the customs officer, "Is this the land of Jinwu's song?" "Pardon?" "Oh, yes." When the flustered customs officer nodded, Leonard flashed a smile. Soon, he'd be able to talk with the most powerful hunter in the world. Leonard had narrowly missed a chance to talk to Jinwu during the International Guild Conference banquet, so his heart raced at the prospect of meeting him here. As he took some deep breaths to try to calm down, the hulking man right behind him lost his temper. "Get out of my way if you're gonna take your sweetest time." Leonard instantly scowled. How dare the stranger be so rude to one of the best hunters in the world? He took off the sunglasses he'd been wearing as a precaution and turned around, determined to teach this man some manners. "Hey! Look me in the eyes and say that again." Leonard frowned at the man who was a head taller than he was. The man removed his sunglasses in turn. "I said, get out of my way." Leonard froze as soon as he recognized who it was, then managed to force out, Please go right ahead." Thomas Andre shoved Leonard aside with his wide shoulders and made his way to the front of the line, leaving Laura to apologize to the German hunter. The customs officer felt like he was suffocating as he laid eyes on Thomas, a national-level hunter considered to be the strongest in the world. With such a towering stature, his nickname, Goliath, was more than fitting. Thomas noticed the officer's face growing pale. He put his sunglasses back on and smirked. "Is this the land of Jinwu's song?" "My liege, if I may, I would like to ask something of my king." Baru, who was currently leading the army of Ant Shadow's soldiers far from Jinwu, made contact out of the blue. What could his most powerful soldier have to say? "What's up?" Jinwu replied telepathically. Baru cautiously asked, "If it pleases my liege, I would like to request that prey be driven toward my location." Driven toward Baru? By prey. Baru was referring to the magic beasts that had escaped into their world via dungeon breaks. Baru was expressing his desire to take care of the magic beasts all by himself. Greed, despite holding the rank of general same as Baru, couldn't bring himself to look Baru straight in the eyes, so this wasn't about his ant subordinates revolting against him. Jinwu pondered the possibilities before it hit him. Could it be? I sensed something similar to the time my whole body went through a metamorphosis, and the more prey I defeat, the stronger the feeling grows. Jinwu's hunch was right on the money. Metamorphosis, in other words, leveling up. Baru had stood on the front lines and fought more enemies than any other soldier ever since he first joined the Shadow Army, and finally the day had come for him to level up. Considering how much stronger high-rank soldiers such as Igris and Iron had become by leveling up, that's great news. Even before becoming a Shadow soldier, Baru was already powerful enough to toy with S-rank hunters. Likewise, his rank was currently the highest among the existing soldiers. That means I'll get to see what rank comes after General. Jin Woo was intrigued to see how this promotion would affect Baru. He replied to the anxiously awaiting ant. "Sure. Thank you, my king. Then I shall return the ant soldiers to you." "No, hang on." A smile spread across Jinwoo's face, though Baru couldn't see it, since they were miles apart. "My soldiers." Jinwoo's army, now approximately 1,200 strong, responded at once to his call. Igris led the knights, Fong led the high orc unit, Jima led the Nagas, Number 6 led the giants, Tank led the ice bearers, and Greed led the remaining soldiers. With the entire army's attention solely on Jin Woo, it was like he could practically hear them all roaring. The tension radiating from them was palpable. Jin Woo relished in it as he issued his command. "Everyone withdraw. Return to me." The Shadow Army began moving as soon as he gave the order. Soldiers returned to Shadow and quickly converged from all over Japan to gather by Jinwoo's feet. "My king, why did you withdraw us all?" Jinwoo grinned at the surprised ant. "You and I will handle the rest of the magic beasts together." That was the best way to hasten Baru's progress. Known as power leveling, it was a strategy used by gamers where a high-level player would help a lower-level player level up quickly. Similarly, Jin Woo was planning to fight beside Baru to maximize the efficiency of hunting and drive up Baru's experience points. With all the dungeon breaks, leveling Baru up would be a piece of cake if they toured together. It would be less efficient than deploying Shadow's soldiers to those areas, but Baru took priority. "My king." Overcome with emotion, Baru couldn't finish his sentence. Jin Woo raised an eyebrow. Baru's voice had become increasingly expressive over time, no doubt influenced by all the TV dramas he'd been watching in the shadows while assigned to protect his mother and sister. Once the last Shadow soldiers arrived, Jin Woo asked, "By any chance, is there any other soldier who can sense when your level is about to go up?" There was no answer, of course. Leveling up was a difficult feat in and of itself, but a soldier would need to have excellent perception in order to sense it. There was a reason Baru was the only soldier capable of informing Jin Woo about the timing of his leveling up, or so Jin Woo assumed, but boom. Another Shadow soldier rose to join them, dashing Baru's dreams of hunting alone with his master. Although Baru looked disappointed, Jinwoo's face lit up. "Excellent!" Igris knelt to his liege as usual. Jin Woo usually felt a little uncomfortable at Igris's extreme formality, but it had been a while, and he welcomed the familiar sight. Jin Woo had also been looking forward to Igris leveling up for some time now. "Then let's begin!" He smiled as he summoned a demon monarch's dagger. Sprouts were already emerging from the remains of the tree-type magic beasts they'd burned down. The spawn rate was truly terrifying. Gaw. There were an additional 40 dungeon breaks to take care of after this. If they were to handle everything among the three of them, there was no time to waste. Jinho felt more at home in the Ajin Guild headquarters than in his actual home, but at this very moment, every minute felt like an hour. Jinho checked the clock on a wall. It was 4:10 in the afternoon, which meant more than 2 hours had passed since that man had arrived. Jinho swallowed nervously, then peeked at the unannounced visitor, worried that he'd swallowed too loudly. He ended up making eye contact with the man, who grinned at him over his sunglasses. Jinho forced his stiff facial muscles into a semblance of a smile and hurriedly looked away. He broke into a cold sweat and picked up his cell phone to try calling his boss again, but his attempt was in vain. Ring. It had been 2 days since Jinho last heard from Jin Woo, and it wasn't about to change anytime soon. Jinho pressed his lips together, and the wonderful employees, who had chosen to work for the Ajin Guild because they saw potential in the organization, followed suit. Within the awkward atmosphere, they stayed silent as if they had planned it together. Who could blame them for doing so? Anyone in this situation would act the same way. The man sitting in the corner of the office was simultaneously one of the most powerful hunters in the world, and the hunter with the worst temper in the world. In addition, he had been badly beaten up and sent to the hospital by their guild president. None of them could dare laugh or chatter away in the presence of Thomas Andre. The #1 hunter in the world had visited the Ajin Guild to meet with Jin Woo. As a result, Vice President Jinho and the other guild members were dying inside. Just as Jinho debated calling Jin Woo one more time, SHHHF, the office's automatic doors slid open. Everyone's gazes snapped toward the entry to see who it was. Jinho's eyes widened. He excitedly leaped out of his seat and spoke with a desperation that reflected what the rest of the staff members were feeling. "Boss!" No wonder the building's been mobbed by reporters. Jin Woo met the gaze of the grinning Thomas Andre. Judging by the look on his face, it didn't appear that Thomas held a grudge against Jin Woo. So why had he come all the way here? Jinho intercepted Jin Woo before Thomas could. "Boss, why was it so hard to reach you?" "I was a little busy. Now that you mention it, your clothes..." Jinho paused. Jin Woo's clothes were covered in the evidence of his many battles. The sight reminded Jinho of their giant killing adventures. If the boss was so preoccupied with hunting these past 2 days that he couldn't call me then, how many magic beasts had lost their lives this time? It gave Jinho chills just thinking about it. At that moment, Thomas leisurely got up and strode over to Jin Woo. He was so tall that he shortened the distance between them in a few steps, coming to a stop right in front of the Korean hunter. Oh no! They wouldn't fight in here, would they? The guild employees nervously held their collective breath, unsure of the relationship between their boss and Thomas. Their hearts beat so loudly that Jin Woo's ears began to ring. "Mr. Sung." Thomas held out his hand. Jin Woo shook it, returning the greeting with a smile. Thomas's smile faded, startled by a sudden realization. How in the world? The American sensed that Jin Woo had changed somehow. It was subtle, but this wasn't the same man he'd met before. Perhaps it was a change in demeanor? Certainly Jin Woo's clothes were much messier than in their first confrontation or in the subsequent meeting at the banquet. Yet regardless of the man's appearance, Thomas felt a sort of toughness radiating from Jin Woo, a firm steadiness that he carried before, but that seemed more pronounced now. Is it even possible? No way. As far as Thomas knew, that was impossible. His keen perception detected the change in Jin Woo from leveling up, but he didn't have a way of articulating what it meant. The handshake ended before he could figure it out. "What brings you to Korea?" Jin Woo inquired. "Oh." Thomas snapped back to his senses, grinning once more. "Didn't you promise me that we'd have a meal together once my hand recovered?" Thomas held up his healed left hand and gave him a wave. "Also," Jin Woo checked the time. It was 4:30 in the afternoon now. Too late for lunch, but too early for dinner. "There's still a lot of time left before dinner, so pardon me for a minute." Jin Woo excused himself and quickly approached Jinho. Since Thomas wasn't here for any important business, he decided to take care of something more urgent. "Could you find me the biggest gate that's open in Seoul?" Jinho's eyes widened at the request. "Is anything fine as long as it's big, boss? I want a high-rank gate even if it's already booked." "Gotcha." Jinho's fingers flew over his keyboard until he found the information he was searching for. His face lit up. There's a dangerous A-rank gate, boss. Really? But the Hunters Guild already claimed it. The news didn't deter Jinwoo. That's fine. Jinwoo wasn't concerned about who owned the raid permit. Rather, he was relieved that things would most likely go smoothly, since he had acquaintances in the guild. He was about to leave the office with a spring in his step, but doubled back to say goodbye to Thomas. I have to take care of some business, so let's talk about dinner later after I come back. Jinwoo was off like the wind, leaving behind a flustered Thomas Andre. In a daze, the American could only stare after Jinwoo before breaking into a loud guffaw. Ha ha! Oh geez! Thomas didn't really have a choice in the matter. Although it was inconsiderate behavior to a guest who had come from afar, Thomas had been the one to show up unannounced. He should have known Jinwoo would be busier than even himself. Well then, you can reach me here. Thomas gave Jinho the phone number of the hotel he was staying at before leaving the office. Phew! Relieved, Jinho let out a sigh of relief, then flinched in surprise at the sudden presence he felt next to him. Oh, you are still here? Leonard had arrived at the guild office way before Thomas had dropped in. Unfortunately, Leonard didn't speak a lick of Korean, but it was painfully obvious that the vice president of the Ajin Guild had forgotten about him until now. I made an appointment and everything. Leonard was treated as a VIP in Germany, but he now lowered his head, feeling small. After all, what could he say after even Thomas Andre left empty-handed without protest? Both magic beasts and hunters had but one life. Downcast, Leonard heaved himself to his feet and wrote his contact number in tiny writing next to Thomas's. The elite strike squad members of the Hunters Guild were in the middle of raid prep, but everyone stopped to stare at Jinwoo as he entered the scene. Hain, who had received a phone call in advance, was the only person not taken aback at his presence. What do you mean you want to borrow a dungeon? Exactly that. I want to borrow a dungeon if possible. Having not seen her in a while, Jinwoo was pleased to see her. Hain, however, thought it ridiculous that his first phone call after a long period of no contact was about borrowing a dungeon. She was about to berate him, but she couldn't bring herself to do so after seeing Jinwoo's bright smile. At a loss for words, she averted her eyes and hesitated as Jonghyun, who had also been expecting Jinwoo, dashed toward them. Hunter-sung! Jinwoo had explained his proposition before his arrival. No guild master would refuse an offer to exterminate all magic beasts, but the boss of the dungeon without touching anything else. Jonghyun, who had been concerned that his people might get injured in the high-rank gate, accepted Jinwoo's offer with open arms, and though they tried not to show it, the strike squad felt the same way. Jinwoo headed for the gate but stopped and turned around when he felt someone grab his sleeve. It was Hain. Her cheeks beat red. She murmured to him, "What are you planning to do inside? I need to test something. My minions are going through some changes." At the mention of his minions, Hain recalled the two she fought in the association's gym, Igris and Baru. They had been too overpowered to be considered minions, strong enough to put the life of an S-rank hunter of her caliber in danger. What kind of changes to such minions would require a test run? Curiosity got the best of Hain, and she quietly asked, "Then, can I go inside with you?" It wasn't a totally altruistic offer, and Jinwoo shook his head immediately. "I'm going to let them run wild, so it'll be too dangerous." Jinwoo gave a firm answer, his eyes completely serious. Hain nodded and withdrew without protest. He passed through the gate, leaving a disappointed Hain behind. "You have entered the dungeon." There was the usual message. Jinwoo summoned Baru from where he'd been waiting in the shadows. "Come out." The Hunters Guild strike squad scrambled to get inside the dungeon once Jinwoo left. Hey, no pushing. The dungeon isn't going anywhere, guys. No need to run. What in the world was the great Jin Woo-sung testing out that he needed to borrow another guild's gate, despite the increased difficulty of A-rank dungeons as of late? The hunters scanned the dungeon interior with inquisitive eyes that quickly filled with shock. The remains of crushed magic beasts left a bloody trail of carcasses that continued into the dark recesses on the opposite side of the cave. They were at a loss for words, not daring to go deeper inside. "I'll look over there." One of the hunters elbowed another hunter standing next to him. The other hunter turned to look at what his guildmate was pointing to without a second thought. His mouth dropped at the gruesome sight. What in the world had happened for a dead magic beast to have been smashed into the ceiling? Considering how dungeons were made up of much stronger materials than regular caves, the scene was astonishing. "I guess I won't be eating dinner tonight." The faces of hunters with weak stomachs grew pale as they took in the magic beast massacre. Even more unbelievable was that Jin Woo had wrapped everything up in less than 10 minutes. A shocked female hunter murmured to herself, "Hunter-sung. He really doesn't give off that kind of impression, but..." The farther they went, the more disturbing evidence of violence they saw. This was the first time she had seen the walls of a dungeon destroyed like this in her 5 years as a hunter. One of the male hunters agreed with her. "Is this what they mean by, like, unleashing your inner beast or something?" But Hayne shook her head. She was sure that this destruction hadn't been caused by Jin Woo. She had witnessed Jin Woo's fighting style several times up close. The Jin Woo she knew finished off his enemies with a clean kill. It was practically art. When Hayne had first seen him in action, she'd gotten lost in how beautiful and fluid his moves were. That meant, which of his minions is capable of? She was suddenly struck with a memory of the monstrous ant minion, who had opened his mouth wide and roared at her, sending chills down her spine. It had been savagery incarnate. Jin Woo said his minion had gone through changes, but just what kind of changes had it gone through? Hayne left her flabbergasted colleagues behind and ran out of the dungeon to try to get some answers, but Jin Woo was already gone. "What's the rush?" Hayne grumbled as she looked around for Jin Woo. She had so many questions for him, and yet, "I'm sure there will be another opportunity." She let out a sigh so gentle a butterfly wouldn't have felt it. She then slowly turned around with a small smile.